Koine, and welcome to Parsing John. Today we are in chapter 1, verse 38. We've got a reasonably long one here compared to the last two videos that we've had. Thank you very much for joining me. Let's go ahead and get started. This is the rubric of everything that we're looking for in verse 38. I want to make sure that we identify everything properly, unlike what I did right there in the very first video. Sorry again for that. And before we actually go through verse 38, one thing that I forgot to do at the end of the last video, I'm sorry, this is going to make this one extra long, is to look for any proper nouns without articles to see if there's any, the two different options for translating them as we've considered before. I don't think there are. Let's make a quick peruse. Okay, we've got disciples right there, but they've got an article. And we've got Jesus right there, and he's got an article. So our only two nouns right there, both of them have articles. We don't have that issue to consider there. We don't need to worry about it. Let's get on to first 38 then. Straphes de ho Jesus kai theasamenos autus akoluthuntas lege autois tidzetete. Oops. Tidzetete. Hoi de epan autu. Rabbi. Ho legetai metherem. That's one's hard, sorry. Metherme neuomenon. Dendaskele pu menes. So far, so good. The very first thing that we find in verse 38, I keep clicking my pen off and on, sorry, is a participle. It looks like it could be a second person singular, but no, this is actually a participle off of the aorist stem. This is from strep. I can't remember the present form. But anyway, epsilon iota sigma there is our nominative singular masculine, and then it's aorist, and it is passive in form, and it is a participle. This means turned, or having been turned. De is our weaker form of and or but. It's almost never used as and. It is sometimes used in to correlate two things, but we don't have the word men, mu, epsilon, nu anywhere before here. So this is just the weaker form of Allah. Ho is from ho he to, which is barely in the screen. This tells us that we have a singular subject here, which makes sense with strephes. Jesus is our unusual name. It doesn't form normally. We had the dative form there. I almost said dative. Jesus, kai is conjunction. So we can close the subject off here, nominative, singular, masculine, the Jesus. But the Jesus turned, or having been turned, kai. And theasamenos is, because of this omicron sigma here, off of our participial ending men right there. This is nominative, singular, masculine. This is aorist, and it is middle or passive in form, and it is participle. This comes from, I think, theaomai, should mean that it is actually going to be middle deponent, probably rather than passive, and this means seeing, having seen. So we would want to take a direct object with this. So we find autus right here from autos, aute, auto. This is accusative, plural, masculine. Those. Akolothuntas, this is that word that I mistakenly jumped to in the previous video. This one right here, this is the participial form of it. Und is our participial stem. Alpha sigma right there is our personal, or it is the case ending. It is accusative, plural, masculine, and this one, yeah, it's got the present stem onto which the participle is built. So present, then active participle. This just means following, along with, or after. Lege autos. But let's go ahead and read everything we have so far. But the Jesus, having been turned and having seen those following along with or along after. Moving on. Lege, epsilon iota right there is our third person singular present, active and indicative form of lego. This means he says. Autois, omicron iota sigma there is dative, plural. Masculine or neuter is going to be masculine because these guys, the two disciples, are masculine. To them, quote. T can either be a interrogative meaning why, or it can be from t meaning what. And we would want to know, we would know which of those to use in English based on our verb, which is zetete. This epsilon iota tau epsilon here is our personal ending. This is actually the second person plural form, since this is a contract verb of the E type, the two, not E types, epsilon, the two epsilons in the stem and the epsilon in the ending contracted together, and we get the diphthong here, epsilon iota. So, second plural. This is off of the present stem. It's active and indicative. All right. So, y'all, to use the South North Americanism, that was probably pretty weird. Seek is what this one means. So, why do you all seek? It doesn't fit very well. So, what, which would mean that this is accusative and singular neuter. What? Hoi epen. This means that we've got a new sentence started, so we can close off those quotes. Hoi is, of course, nominative, plural, masculine. De means but. We don't have a noun in here for that to modify, which means this is being used in a more Homeric way. Back in the Homeric days, the articles weren't actually articles, they were pronouns. So when you said ho, it was actually the equivalent in English of saying he, or he was the equivalent of saying she. So this would be those ones, or them, they, since they're the subject. Epen, epan. Alpha nu there is third person, plural, aorist, from lego ero, epon, and it is active, indicative, said. Autoi. Omicron subiota here is dative singular masculine, referring back to Jesus, to him. That's right. Capitalized. Quote. Rabbi. End quote. Rabbi, since it comes from Aramaic, there is not really a form that we can identify for it in Greek, so I'm just going to have to leave that as is and try to remember how to spell rabbi in English. I think it's just the same thing, essentially. Rabbi. I'll have to leave that as it is. It's all right. Ho, with the grave accent right there, is nominative or accusative singular from hos, he, ho, the relative pronoun. Legetai is singular third person. It is present, middle passive, indicative. So this is probably going to be nominative, singular, neuter. Which, legetai, if it's middle, then the action is being done for the sake of the subject or for the sake of the object. If it's passive, then it's being done to the subject, the object. So we want to try both to see which one makes more sense. So which passively is said, or there's not really a good way to say it in English, so let's just stick with passive. Is said, or it could be which says for the sake of something else. We don't really have something else in there for it to be in favor of, so passive does seem to be our best option, if not the only option. metherme neuomenon. You've got men here, which is the stem of a participle. On is nominative or accusative singular. Since we've got neuter here, it's sensible that this would be neuter. But it could technically also be masculine. And then this one is off of the present stem. And it is not active. Sorry about that. Passive participle. And this means translates. So if we take it as a passive, as its form is, it would be translated. And it makes most sense for it to go with our subject already, since it's acting passively upon something. So nominative, not accusative, and neuter, not masculine. Quote, which being translated is said, or is said being translated, teacher. And didaskale, since it ends in this epsilon here, we know it is vocative, singular, and masculine. Comma, pu menes. Epsilon iota sigma here is not a participial ending. Instead, this is, in fact, our second person singular present, active, and indicative. And I believe the quote ends here because he responds to them with a question or something. You are staying, the English, and then pu here is a interrogative, and it just means where. And there we go. The internal context of verse 38. But the Jesus, having been turned and having seen those following along with him, he says to them, what do you all seek? But those ones said to him, Rabbi, which is said, being translated, teacher, where are you staying? Should probably put a question mark there and move that right there. And now we would want to take a look at the greater context of verse 35 through verse 38 before we forget, like it did in the first video. Not the first video, the second Latin video. I forgot even that. On the next day again, the specific John had stood, and two from his disciples, and having looked at the Jesus walking about, he said, behold, the Lamb of the God. And the two disciples heard him speaking, and they followed along after the specific Jesus. But the Jesus, having been turned and having seen those following along with him, we can insert the word him into there. He says to them, what do y'all seek? But those ones said to him, Rabbi, which is said, being translated, teacher, where are you staying? And there is the entire context of everything we've done so far. Let's go ahead and check through this text to make sure that there aren't any nouns, proper nouns, without articles. Let's consider our two options if there are any. Jesus here in the first line has an article with him, so that's not a problem. And then we don't have any nouns. Rabbi is in a completely different language, so I wouldn't even know, since I don't know Hebrew, if we would want an article there or not. So also it's going to be vocative there, since the didaskale here is also vocative, so that wouldn't even matter. And we don't have any other nouns. So none of that to consider in this verse. Thank you very much for joining me. I hope taking a look at this verse has been helpful for you, and I hope that you continue to join me as we get closer and closer to the end of this chapter. Have a good day.